One group that's saying, look, it's not even worth it. And and people identified with that. There were African Americans that identified with that. So that's the first thing he said, abandoning this Christian religion. Next thing, the white man is the devil. Okay? The white man's the devil? No. He's good to us. No. And this is another thing, this was one of the other things that whites were so shocked at, is that here's this black anger, and how could they be this angry at us? You know, they turned a blind eye to the oppression that they subjected blacks to, and didn't expect a response. Well, at least they didn't expect a negative response. They expected submissiveness. Okay, so here's a group that's saying no. Just like they're calling you a monkey and an ape and everything like that, they're the devil. All right. The Nation of Islam labeled the white race as physical devils and intrinsically evil. One of the foundational teachings of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, is that whites are actually devils, cursed from the day they were created and grafted, with the primary goal of making mischief and shedding blood of the black nation whom they were grafted from. Again, he didn't have to make a stretch. Okay, because if you say things like this and you give examples, well, look at your life now. That's all he had. That's all that they had to say. Look at your life now and tell me what I'm not saying is true. Now, if you're a black person at this time and you had segregation and Jim Crow and people being burned and your children, your young men are being put in chain gangs and hung, it's not a far stretch. Muhammad's teaching contended that the grafted white man is a creation of a maniacal scientist by the name of Yaqub, who brought about a people, the present white race, who were a completely new people made out of the original of us, that were really pale white with really blue eyes, which we think are the ugliest colors of a human eye, and whose sole purpose was the degradation of blacks. Okay, so now the whole thing about disparaging the black body, they did the same thing. Okay, and it allowed people, and blacks were able to identify with it because they had been downtrodden for generationally, and now here's someone saying, look, you have a reason to be proud. Okay, you don't have to look up to these groups of people, this group of people that have treated you so badly over generations. Okay, therefore, according to the teachings of the Nation of Islam, whites were unnatural and should be reviled. W.E.B. Du Bois observed that historically the best of whites and the best of Negroes almost never live in anything like close proximity. So both whites and blacks see commonly the worst of each other. This was more so back then, okay, and it still exists today. It's not something that, you know, well, that's some, you know, last night we had a really, really good panel on race and policing, and someone had made the comment that, why are we still talking about slavery? Okay, because semblance of it still exists. This segregation still exists. Okay, there are very few really integrated communities, especially here on Long Island. Okay, there's still communities I will not venture into in the dark. I'll drive through them, okay, but I won't go through them. There are still, being a black person in the wrong community will get you stopped by police. Okay, so it's still the same as it was back then. So for many blacks who were exposed to the basest members of white society, the white man being the actual devil was not such an incredible notion. Okay, so it appealed to them. All right, the Nation of Islam aggressively drew converts from among lower class blacks as societal outcasts, such as prisoners and prostitutes. They went into the prisons. Okay, they went to uplift the black man that had been so downtrodden for centuries. So they actually went into the prisons. Remember, and they taught this. They went into the prisons, look at where you are, and look who put you there. Okay? Remember that these demographics were most likely impoverished with lives bereft of consistent structure and security. Muhammad sought to make new converts fit to be called Muslims and contributing members to society. So it wasn't just enough to say, look at what these people are doing to you. Now it's time for you to get out of that. Okay, so they became a paramount, they became very, very regimented. You see this picture here. Okay, so they took people who had no focus in life, and they gave them focus. All right, the paramilitary divisions of the nation, the Fruit of Islam, Male Corps, and the Muslim Girl Training Female Corps at the time, incorporated a disciplinary system that involved physical training and exercises in many ways to keep physically fit and healthy, and to try to get away from many of the physical ailments with Elijah Muhammad's religious teaching. So that was one of the things that they did. They completely had their followers completely change their lifestyle. You didn't smoke anymore. You didn't drink anymore. Men who were encouraged to be husbands and fathers, okay, and to take on that role. You know, this was a group that really, really encouraged that, and they gave them a way of getting into a different lifestyle. Okay, so that was very appealing to a lot of blacks who were, you know, just their lives were demolished by the institutionalized racist system in America. All right, Elijah Muhammad conveyed a conception among blacks that they represented something more than what undereducated bigotry and popular stereotypes allotted for them. So just even the idea of being proud of your skin color, okay, being proud of your hair, okay, having a certain decorum and portment, okay, when you walk. This was something that blacks needed, okay, and that whites didn't like. So this was one of the reasons why the Nation of Islam was so disliked. All right. Okay, so now Elijah Muhammad taught that adoption of the X, so that was the whole other thing, get rid of your slave name. Adoption of the X was to stop the usage of the slave name, which will keep you a slave in the eyes of the civilized world today. The most famous example is Malcolm X. Okay. The whole idea that those names that were given to you, that they have an impact on you as a human being. Okay, and as a matter of fact, to this day, Muslim Americans who convert, they're given the choice. Would you like to take a name that's more conducive now with your faith? Okay, not everyone does. Some combine them. All right, so they'll keep their original name, and then they will add a more Islamically recognizable name. So Elijah Muhammad said, abandon that. So just like you're abandoning this religion, and you're abandoning hope, actually, of coexisting with these people, because they don't want to coexist with you. All right. Also abandon the names that they're stamping on you that came from slavery, and uplift yourself. As members of the Nation of Islam, African Americans were encouraged to embrace discipline and ideal self-image that rejected stereotypes and labels created by the white dominant racial structure. Instead, Asiatic Islam served as a social and cultural compass, but maintained American influence. Okay, so we see here, you can't really see it. So here's Muhammad Ali. All right, and so this is a starred crescent. That was one of the things that they adopted, okay, which is actually from Turkey. But it was one of the things they adopted. They wanted to abandon any kind of symbolism that was directly associated with America, and thus their subjugation as black people. So they were Muslims, so they started to embrace a lot of symbols that were directly associated with Islam. Okay, and you also see their dress. One of the interesting things, though, about the Nation of Islam is that they did maintain an Americanesque dress. So you'll see the bow ties and the suits and things like that. So they did maintain, they managed to maintain some of their American identity, but also apply an Islamic identity to it as well. All right, so let's look at what the Quran actually teaches. All right, the three ideologies: Christianity being the white man's religion, the white man being the devil, and black supremacy utilized by the Nation of Islam, conflicts with Quranic teachings. All right, according to the Quran, Christians are nearest to them in affection to the believers. Therefore, the Nation of Islam labeling Christianity the religion of the white man is specific to the American Muslim, resulting from the country's racial construct. Okay, so in Islam, Christianity is not allocated to one group of people. Okay, it's not allocated to one race or nationality or anything like that. Okay, it's a belief system. It was a belief system that proceeded from that came from the Prophet Jesus, which is in the line of prophets that are revered in Islam. Okay, so this whole idea that it's just the white man's religion, which again, he didn't have to make a hard sell on it, is not in accordance with Islamic teachings. The concept of the white man being the actual devil contradicts the Quran's description of the devil, known as Iblis, as a separate form of creation and not human or a particular member of the human race. So the whole idea that just like whites allocating these characteristics solely to blacks, okay, was wrong. What the Nation of Islam was doing was wrong. It was effective, but it wasn't in accordance with Islamic teachings. You know, the devil is a particular type of creation in Islamic teaching, and he's not human. Okay, actually, he does not like us. The Nation of Islam's platform of black supremacy is another American cultural product added to the Islamic doctrine. O mankind, indeed, we have created you from male and female, and we made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Okay, so this whole idea that you can't coexist with other peoples is not something that's taught in Islam. It's actually encouraged to get to know other people and have some cultural relevancy, all right, and treat people with respect and dignity. But because of the experience that African Americans had at the time, the Nation of Islam took a very countermeasure response to white supremacy. Okay, and it was helpful. It was helpful in the sense that, you know, they were responsible for a lot of the like black pride and everything like that started to come out, especially like in the 70s and things like that.
And entrepreneurship.
And entrepreneurship, yeah, being self-sufficient. Okay, so they strongly encourage that. All right, and not falling into the vices that would destroy your life. Okay. All right, so now American Islam. By introducing the above social concepts in response to the American racial culture into Islam, the Nation of Islam created a form of Islam tailored to the indigenous Americans who would gravitate to such teachings. So now these weren't foreigners coming to you and saying you should, you know, let me tell you about this religion of mine. Okay, these were your own people coming to you and say, listen, you need to wake up and see the light. Okay, and here's one way of doing that, of making your life better, of getting a better connection to God. All right, Muslim imagery like head coverings, kimars for women and kufis for men, and the star and crescent, as well as expressions such as Allah and Islam, became part of the American social dialogue. African American Muslims in the Nation of Islam created a form of Islam which reflected the socio-cultural turmoil at the time. However, it also opened a gateway. Okay, it opened a gateway that allowed, because it became so popularized in African American communities, it opened a gateway for it to be now expand to the broader American society, which it did. The Nation of Islam was the first substantial indigenous American Muslim group. This was one of the first instances of the American Muslims' tradition of asserting their own form of the Muslim identity. Okay, so now it wasn't something that was cultural from overseas. This was an initial American interpretation of Islam by its indigenous people. Okay, and it has since changed. All right, although the Nation of Islam's influence among indigenous American Muslims waned, and the majority of African American Muslims associate themselves with some form of mainstream Islam, meaning they either consider themselves Sunni or Shia, it holds the unique position of ushering American Islam onto the country's cultural stage. The country started paying attention. When you had, even though it was because of the social turmoil, and you had these people in these funny clothes calling us devils and things like that, it got attention. And not only got attention from African Americans, it got attention from white America as well. African American Muslims represent the first direct association of the religion with the population enmeshed in the American social fabric. And that's one thing that, you know, even now it's really starting to come out in American Islam. The fact that it has to be appreciated, the influence that African Americans, the African American experience, and African American Muslims have, the influence that they had on Islam becoming an American religion, a recognizable American religion. Because there were we had immigrant populations. We even had some Euro-American Muslims. And if you look up one, Alexander Webb, okay, he was oh God, Alexander Russell Webb. He was, you know, when you go and you represent your country. Ambassador, thank you. An ambassador in Malaysia. And that's where he learned about Islam, and he became Muslim, and he actually wrote a book. Okay, and it's still, you know, it was in the Victorian age, so it was the turn of the century. Okay, and you know, this was something that didn't really have the same influence that the Black Muslim movement had. Okay, you had Muslim groups in the United States. They did not have the same influence that the Black Muslim movement had. It wasn't until the Black Muslim movement, until the Moorish Science Temple, to the Nation of Islam, then it started to fracture off. You had like the 5%ers, and then more African Americans from those groups started to look and study and gravitate towards Sunni Islam. That you had like this really a foundation of Islam as an American religion. We need to honor the African American community and recognize their importance in transforming this country into a more pluralistic and tolerant place. They are the people who paved the way for the immigrant Muslim community. And that's Hamza Yusuf. Can't really see him. That's that man right here. Interestingly enough, the first college, all right, now there are other colleges. There were other colleges or other Islamic institutions in the United States, but the first accredited college at Berkeley was started by 2 native-born American Muslims. So despite the fact you had an immigrant population, all right, it's still something needs to be said about the fact that having indigenous groups accept a religion plays a large role in it becoming foundational in the society. All right, and this is Siraj Wahaj. He used to be a member of the Nation of Islam, and now he's a major influence as well. He's a highly respected scholar in American Muslim communities, both indigenous and immigrant. Okay, so here we have American Islam. It's extremely diverse now. All right, you have a growing tide of Latino Muslims in the United States. They're starting to they're starting to find again their connection, just like Elijah Muhammad encouraged African Americans to reconnect with Islam. Latino Americans are finding that connection with Islam as well. There's a large immigrant population from South Asia and the Middle East. Okay, you have a growing Euro-American population. Okay, this is a Euro-American author, Sahar Abdulaziz. Here's Ingrid Madison. Technically, she's Canadian, but I'm like, no, she's ours. She's ours. She's ours. Okay, and these are students of the first accredited Islamic college, Zaytuna Academy, that was started by the 2 gentlemen that I showed before. So you see, it's a diverse population of students. Okay, so they're immigrants, they're first generations, the African Americans expand. And this right here, this is by an organization, Al Maghrib Institute. This is one of their seminars. Okay, and they have their seminars all over the United States. Every single month, I think there's a seminar. Multiple seminars all over the United States. They usually garner between 200 to 350 and up of students. No? Less? More than that? Okay. So I was just being like conservative because that time I went, it was like 250 or 300.